Hello again. Welcome to another session of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Ailes. You're stuck with me as the moderator. And pardon me, I've had laryngitis for like 3 months or so. So uh, we have with us Dr. Sarah Andrea, who's currently an assistant professor of business management and related technologies at Kent State University, Tuscarora's campus. And we have Dr. Michelle Corvette, who's currently the director of faculty development and immersive learning at William Peace University in Raleigh, North Carolina. They're going to talk today about enhancing students' interaction, motivation, and engagement with gamification ungrading strategies. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Bob. Hi, everyone. We appreciate you being with us today. And Sarah and I are so grateful to be here. We presented at last year's conference. We had such a great time. We were thrilled to be invited to come back. So, just a little bit about us and who we are. As Bob so graciously said, introduced us. But I just wanted to give you a little bit more about who I am and what I do. So, I am at William Peace University in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have been director of faculty development there for almost 2 years and really enjoying it. We love working with our faculty. Immersive learning is something we do in all of our classes, and it's a form of experiential learning, but we do it from first year seminars all the way through graduation. So our students get that wonderful hands-on experience with their education. And Sarah and I met at Kent State in my former position there, and it was really wonderful to help Sarah fine tune and develop some amazing strategies that she's going to get to share with you in a little bit of what she actually applied in her classes. And Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more too?
Sure. So I am a professor of business. So I teach a lot of first year students. And when I started to dig into this topic, I was so grateful to have Michelle because she has a lot of that theory and book expertise where I was doing it from the experience aspect of it. And so I started thinking about ungrading when we read Ungaming, um, why Rating Students Undermines Learning. It was this book right here by Susan Blum. And it was such a eye-opening experience for me that I immediately started to change the way I ran my classes. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
Fantastic. Our overview for today is we are going to talk to approaches about grading and ungrading, the benefits, of course, and then Sarah's going to hit us home with the applied applications of gamification and grading. So we thought it was always good, right, for modeling to have some outcomes. So we really hope in this session you'll be able to identify alternative assessments for more equitable practices in grading, evaluate gamification, and kind of see it through the lens of inclusion, and think about if this is something you could do with your class or with a unit within your class, and then set some more goals for assessment practices and engagement. So I wanted to start with a traditional grading question, right? So what does traditional grading lack? And I really love Chatterfalls. So if you have your Zoom opened up, you should see three little dots that will let you open up the chat box. If you can open up the chat box, you can pull up that tab. And we're going to do what's called a Chatterfall. And so ready, set, go means you type in your answer, but you don't hit return yet. You just wait a second. And then when I say go, you'll hit return. And that way it creates this really beautiful Chatterfall. And so some of you I know are playing around on your devices. That's great. So if you can go in the chat and just reflect for a minute, what does traditional grading lack? And just give yourself space to answer however you see fit. And we'll just pause for a minute. Great. I see some of you still typing. You're finishing it up. Wonderful. So we'll say ready, set, and then you can go ahead and hit that arrow. Nice. Look, we're getting a Cheddarfall. It's so great. Thank you all so much. Nice. Oh, these are beautiful, right? Yes. It only has one measurement. Yes. Efficiency, hard to grade, boring, lacks engagement, feedback. Thank you, Kelsey. Yes. Understanding student learning journey, equity in student voices, ease, 100%. Oh my gosh. Thank you all so much. And Jesse Strommel, who is a person who's been thinking about ungrading for a long time, hit on some of those, right? Like grades aren't fair. They're a mechanism of institutional control. They can pit students and teachers against each other, which is terrible. Not good markers of learning. And this echoes it like no effective feedback, right? So there's just nothing there that really helps the students kind of gain that broader understanding. And what is really beautiful about ungrading, and I love that Sarah held up the book already, it's an alternative assessment practice, okay, that minimizes that use of letter grading in the course. Doesn't mean you don't have to use letter grading, it means you can minimize it. It focuses instead on providing that frequent and detailed feedback to help students actually understand their course learning and really keep them going and moving forward. Ungrading is not for everyone. I will fully state that up front. When we did our reading group, we had some professors who were, in their fields and in their disciplines. They were like, there's no way I can do this. And the most amazing thing that happened with those professors is that they said, well, actually, there's a way I could do some of this. And that's the beauty of ungrading is you don't have to think I have to ungrade my whole course. It can just be a unit or it can be a different approach to assessment. So let me just give you a quick example of one of those professors. They were from mathematics. They said I had to really, I have to cover everything with finite to statistics. I have to make sure all the students are on board. I have to give them these exams. And about halfway through our reading group, they paused and said, I could offer them the opportunity to redo the two exams before the final. And by giving them that opportunity to redo, it is a form of ungrading because you're undoing that grade that they got on a previous exam. They set it up so that the students would have a second chance of completing that exam. And only a few students actually took this professor up on it. And they saw a remarkable difference, though, in how the students responded to the exams that they had set up. So there's lots of different approaches. And the beauty of it is that this keeps getting talked about a lot. And so we have Undoing the Grade. This is Jesse's book that just came out last year. And then this year we have Joshua Eiler's book, Failing Our Future and How Grades Harm Students and What We Can Do About It. These are both excellent books to read. If you want to grab a screenshot, it can just help you. And if you don't have time to read them, reach out to your teaching learning center or just reach out to me. Or you can use AI and ask Perplexity AI to give you a synopsis of the book, right? There's all different ways to figure out this content now. But I have to tell you, reading these three books, the one that Susan wrote, the one that Jesse wrote and Joshua wrote, have had a huge impact on my understanding and even how I teach my classes. So I offer that as some background content to help you understand and get more versed in ungrading. I'm going to just highlight briefly some key points that these books are able to articulate better, but it just helps understanding the importance of this. It does encourage a growth mindset, which we know builds on the research from Carol DeWick, and it helps us understand that the students can take agency of their learning. It's going to free students. It's going to allow them to take more risks and engage more with their creative thinking. And it's going to allow them to actually do more and higher quality work. And this is really fascinating research that Susan Bloom highlights in her book, is that when you take the traditional grading system out, the students are more likely to engage with the content because the pressure is off them, so to speak. And so their performance increases exponentially as the pressure is removed because then that anxiety is not there. Furthermore, it can actually give you a chance to reduce that stress for the students. It can promote well-being. And we know specifically with online courses, it can be hard sometimes to check in with our students all the time to get that visual feedback, how they are doing, especially if it's asynchronous. And it gives you greater responsibility for the students in terms of their value and quality of learning, in terms of particularly peer evaluation. So if you do any kind of collaborative projects, if they're working with each other, ungrading that, but giving them more and more feedback really helps the students actually connect the dots to their learning, which is going to help them connect the dots to the real world applications. And finally, I thought, well, finally on this slide, this hit me hard when I read it. The students don't think of themselves as like, oh, I'm a C student or I'm a B student. They don't have to have that correlation between their self-esteem and motivation. They can separate that out. They can see themselves as learning for learning's sake, and it helps them become a more holistic, lifelong learner, giving them a chance to reevaluate and redefine who they are in the classroom. And I love that some of you put in your Chatterfall the equity question and fairness. It does offset inequalities, so it does give students a chance who come from a variety of different backgrounds to be in the same classroom with each other, knowing that they are there to learn, even if it is just one unit, not necessarily the whole course. It improves the classroom climate. Again, it's going to create that mutual supportive classroom that we're learning together. And then it can take away and address actually any kind of just or unjust systems. And I don't know about you all, but I know that when I was in my own particular undergrad and even my graduate programs, I did encounter professors who were so just oblique about how they graded us. There was no transparency, there was a lack of communication, and sometimes I would just get a grade in the system, which was usually written on a essay or paper, if I even got that essay or paper back, right? And it would just, the grade's just there, and maybe there was zero feedback, or the worst is feedback that becomes stereotyped or cliched, right? Like, good job. And so there was nothing for me to grow from or understand or improve from. And again, that can create that unjust grading perception of, well, how did the professor actually read this and interpret it? And how can I grow and improve, especially when our students know that that is why they are there to get an education. So let me just talk briefly about the principles of ungrading with you. You want to make sure you're always going back to your course goals. So when you look at the classes you're teaching, you're looking at your syllabi, you're thinking of what you need to cover, look at those course goals and make sure that ungrading is going to be aligned with those course goals. And again, if you can't do it for the whole course, is there a unit you could do it in that would help relieve some of the stress for the students? Communication becomes key. And this is really strong that we all learn together, is that it's okay to be transparent. If this is your first time ungrading a section of a course or the whole course, it is absolutely great to tell your students up front, I am trying out ungrading. We're going to see how this goes. I need your all's help and your feedback as much as I'm giving you feedback to see if this is even going to work for this course. And it's important to communicate that you acknowledge that with ungrading, the school system is set up, the structure as such, you will be issued a letter grade at the end that will be reflective of the amount of work you did in the course. And so because federal law asks us to give a grade so the student can progress in the system, towards graduation, it is good to communicate that clearly to the students. Now it's up to you, and Sarah's going to give us a great example soon of how you can set that up in terms of ungrading completely or ungrading through points or ungrading through contracts. There's lots of different ways to do it. And then I want to also say with communication, I believe in formative feedback wholeheartedly. And so I always check in with my students like halfway through before midterms. I believe in anonymous formative feedback, such as ticket out the door, where I just ask my students to take a piece of paper, write down, what stood out to you today? How is ungrading going? I can give them, any kind of question I want. I ask them to just jot it down anonymously. Sometimes I do it on a Google form where they can just submit it anonymously. I don't record their email address back. I get such good feedback on that, and I can adjust the course in real time to be able to figure out how to improve this even more for the students. It touches upon metacognition, and the beauty about metacognition, right, is, how do we know that the students are learning this? How do the students know, how are they learning the learning? I really enjoy I call them cognitive wrappers, and in the research, it's often referred to as exam wrappers. But I think cognitive wrappers are really nice, where you can have a series of questions again, either before, after an assessment or a feedback sheet, where you ask the students, how much time did you spend on this? What stood out to you? What do you wish you had spent more time on learning? And you can do that wrapper before the exam and after the exam. And it gives the student that ability to have reflection in the moment. And I use the word exam loosely. It could be any kind of project, but it builds in that reflection before, the pre, and the post, which is really helps. And then also it builds on trust. And so you have to make sure that you have a good rapport with your students, that you are comfortable in the classroom. I'm actually working with a faculty member right now who is in his second year of teaching. He is doing simulation game design at our university, and he really wanted the students to focus in on just understanding coding principles and not having this burden of, am I going to pass this course or not? And so he is ungrading that entire course. And we've worked very carefully to come up with a point system so that students can accomplish what they need to. We build on universal design for learning, and I hope you know about UDL. If you do not, you can check it out. You can go to cast.org. It's cast.org, and they have a 3.0 version of universal design for learning. It really provides students with the understanding that there are different ways to tap into your cognitive abilities and the way you have export for those abilities to demonstrate your evidence of learning. So the UDL guidelines at cast.org, the HTTP is down at the bottom there. Please check that out. It just really helps incorporate some universal practices for education. And especially, we know teaching with online, we don't always know who our students are. Sometimes we're able to do a background questionnaire at the beginning of class, sometimes not. It just really helps set that up, a structure for a win-win for everyone. So ungrading options, and so faculty feedback is so important. And I have never heard a student say, I don't want any more feedback. I usually hear students begging for more feedback because they know that there's always something there that they can improve on. And so with ungrading options, feedback really sort of becomes, I think, number one. And with feedback, what I have developed over time is I've noticed I do repeat myself to different students on different projects, et cetera, where I take that understanding and maybe I need to clarify that more in my instructions. And sometimes I find that there are just growth opportunities for the students. And so I actually have in my Google Docs, like a feedback sheet. And so these are things that I find myself saying to students a lot, so I don't have to keep typing it over and over again. I've also started doing feedback by video conferencing. And so I will either do a video recording of myself or even just a voice recording, and I post that on our LMS. And I find that students enjoy that a lot. And so that kind of helps facilitate the feedback and gives them different options for either listening, visually seeing, and or still reading the feedback. Of course, we have self-evaluation, which is wonderful, I think, for students to have that reflective piece of, again, that touches on metacognition. What did they know before? What do they know after? What are they experienced during? Peer evaluation is great too. You can have ungrading with peer evaluation where it's more of you can even do a Likert setup scale where they're able to just evaluate their peers without feeling like they have to assign a grade or have that grade actually be part of their peer or group collaborative grade. Specifications grading, we can thank Linda Nielsen for that. You can totally Google that. It'll pop up her book. I think it's a great book. It's a great resource. It was a little too, I would say, dictated for me when what I wanted to do with my classes, because I really wanted to have a little bit more openness and freedom to how I approached on grading. And the same for me with contract grading. I wasn't totally comfortable with asking students to sign a contract because it insinuated so much for me, but other professors use it all the time. Please understand. And contract grading is more where you create a contract with the students and you have them sign it. Sometimes you negotiate with that student, but sometimes it is just a straight form where you say you must complete all of this to earn this grade or this grade, and you understand that up front. And what we thought when we were reading the book on grading is that gamification on grading was really missing. And this was an ability to unify the gamification that we see in Gen Z, Gen Alpha, the generations coming up, where they've grown up with gamification. They've grown up understanding gaming, both in the video realm and life realm. We experience gamification all the time. If you are a frequent flyer of an airline, you might have a miles point system. If you stay at certain hotels, you have hotel points. That's all gamification. Starbucks even does it for their coffees. And all of that kind of gamification is actually so embedded in our lives now that we don't even realize sometimes that we're being gamified. But we find that when you use gamification with ungrading, that you can actually help students visualize their achievements and their accomplishments, and they can see it in real time, especially for online learners. They can have a checkbox, they can see how they're progressing, and it gives them those clear goals. With that, there are benefits as well. So they take ownership of their learning because, as we know, with some synchronous and asynchronous classes, they might be setting their own parameters for when they're going to be doing things and getting things done. Even if you have deadlines, they may need to do it sooner. It's going to help them not be so afraid that they cannot take a risk, right? They might want to try something. It's going to give them a little bit more freedom to try something. They might want to focus on one of their strengths, or they might want to grow one of their weaknesses, depending upon you have gamified your course. It promotes learning as fun. And this is interesting because I find some educators and our faculty members are like, should learning be fun or not? I think it should be fun. And we have to remember that, learning is what we make it. And sometimes, especially with our first year students, it gets them more engaged. And with our seniors, it helps remind them, to make sure they step back. And I think it gives them a chance to be more creative. It's going to increase engagement and concentration. I do find that gamification, that way I've used it in my courses, has really helped my students stay more focused. They don't have to wait until midterms to see how they're doing. They can actually have that real-time feedback. Learning becomes visible, right, through process indicators, and it does increase community and socialization. So a lot of that benefits, I think, feeds into what students are kind of craving now in the classroom, for both synchronous and asynchronous and even in-person courses, building on their skill sets, helping them understand that. And what I love about all of this is that when you take it all holistically and you put it together, it gives you a chance to create that alternative assessment, gives your students a chance for that growth opportunity, engagement, and motivation and metacognition, to kind of bring it all together. And I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen now and give Sarah a chance to share her screen, because I want her to be able to take over and really highlight how she applied this in her courses.
Thanks, Michelle. All right. So when I first started to think about ungrading and gamification, what I was thinking about in my head was this idea of paths for success. And so I did it, first of all, just in 2 classes, my introduction to business class and my intro to management class. So just 2 classes. And I started small. The very first semester, I didn't do a lot in the classes, but I just wanted to kind of figure it out. So I was teaching these classes. It was one class was in person, one was on online asynchronous. And I asked my students, I said, hey, if I do ungrading, will you do the assignments? And they told me no. If there's not a grade assigned to it, I'm not going to do it. And so I was like, okay, I've got to figure out this ungraded gamification. If I'm going to do it, I have to do points or something with it. And that's how the gamification piece came on with this. So what I did was I brainstormed and I made a list of every single assignment that I could possibly have a student do, and I assigned available points to that. I then made due dates in the middle of the semester, towards the end of the semester, so students had lots of flexibility in doing what they want to do when they wanted to do it. What I discovered was that was not a great thing, and I'll talk about it in just a second. So I had points assigned. So by midterm, if you wanted to get an A in the course, you had to have 47 points. By the end of the semester, if you wanted to have an A, you had to have between 94 and 100 points. So there's lots of work. And most of the assignments that I had only have 1 point to them. So that is a lot more work than the students were originally doing in my course. And it's very fascinating to me that they were actually doing more in the new course. The thoughts behind this paths to success with ungrading gamification was self-management, choice, them learning how to prioritize, create some excitement and engagement. So I tried to really work on setting the students up for success, providing feedback using their name, creating video reminders in class. And I think most importantly, at least for me, is I also put in there the ability for the student to redo tasks. I called them tasks. I changed the wording. Most of the time, when students hear the word homework, they associate it with busy work. And I wanted to break that, because the reality is the homework is where they do a lot of the learning. That's where you put into practice what you're trying to learn. And so I've changed my verbiage. When I'm talking to other professors, I call it homework. When I'm talking to my students and I'm explaining it to them, I call it tasks, because tasks sound like it's something important that you need to do in order to get what you're trying to accomplish done. So the very first semester, the feedback that I got from students was some positive and some unsure. So some liked the idea of completing tasks and getting to manage it and do it whenever they wanted. Other students didn't like it because they would rather be told what to do. And I find that super fascinating. Because I teach business, I want students to learn how to decide what to do. When they get a job in business, their boss is not going to say, hey, these are all the things you need to do, and this is the order you need to do it. As you move up in management, you're expected to be the person who figures that out. So my perspective on the first iteration of this was it takes a lot of time to give feedback and give points, but it's also very important. I have students who tell me that they take online asynchronous courses and rarely, if ever, get feedback from their instructors. And for me, I'm not sure that's very effective. Feedback is what helps people grow and learn. So I think feedback is important. I loved turning my grades into points. I think that was probably one of the best things that I've ever done, because what I discovered is it's easy when I was traditional grading to be like, oh, is this an A paper or is this a B paper? And spend a lot of time agonizing over that. I don't have to do that anymore. It's just, did you do it or didn't you do it? And was the quality of what you did worth the point? And then what I do is I give them a point. If they don't get a point, they can redo the assignment or task as many times as they need to in order to earn the point that they want. And I think it's important to find your rhythm and find out what is important to you in what you're trying to get accomplished in the class. So the second iteration, and actually I have changed this multiple times since I've been doing it, because every semester I ask for feedback from my students about what worked well and what didn't work well, and I tweak things. There's sometimes like students will tell me, hey, we use McGraw-Hill Smartbook is one of the things that I use, and it has questions that the students have to answer, and then it also has reading assigned, and it connects the two. And students will often tell me, I think you should take out the smart books, right? Well, I'm not going to take out the smart books because I know that that's an important part of their learning process. But because they're giving me that feedback, it helps me decide if it's too long or maybe I need to tweak it and do it a different way. So one of the most important things to think about if you're thinking about doing ungrading and gamification is your LMS or your learning management system has to support it. The very first time I did the iteration of all the assignments and letting students have choice, Canvas, which is the software that we use, could not support that option. So what I did instead was I took all those assignments and I put them into weekly. So they had weekly due dates. And then I let the students opt out of 2 to 3 points per week in those tasks that they were assigned. So in one of my courses, there's probably anywhere from 8 to 10 tasks that are due each week. So there's a variety of different things. There is the smart books, which is the reading. There's some type of discussion post. There's some role playing. There are video quizzes. There's a whole bunch of different ways for the students to learn the content that we're trying to get them to learn. And the reason that I let them opt out is because there's such a variety of ways to learn it. There might be a student who says, you know what? I like all this other stuff, but I hate doing discussion boards. Like discussion boards are horrible for me. Great. Opt out of that and do all those other assignments, and you're still going to be getting all that knowledge that I'm trying to make sure that you're getting in different ways. And it's also interesting to me, I would say out of my classes, I usually have anywhere from 25 to 30 students, probably only about 5 to 6 of them opt out. The rest of them do all the tasks in the module that week. The other thing I do is I have all my assignments due on Friday nights by 11:59 p.m. The reason I did this was that most instructors have their assignments due Sunday nights at 11:59, and I wanted to change that practice because I'm just thinking work wise, right? Most people when they're working, they work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, then they're off on the weekends, and I want to reinforce that it's okay to be off on the weekends and not do work. But the other thing I wanted to do was make sure I didn't penalize students who were working 50 or 60 hours during the week and they did their assignments on the weekends. So I put in a grace period. So even though the assignments are due Monday nights or Friday nights, they have until Monday 8 a.m. to finish them and submit them. And this semester, especially, I've had 3 students reach out to me in different ways. One email, other 2 came into my optional Zoom meeting to specifically tell me, hey, I really appreciate the grace period, because they don't have to tell me they're going to use the grace period. They can just do it. And I love that for the students. The other thing that I've done is I add the phrase learning community to all messages and feedback. So if I'm giving a student feedback, the first thing I'll say in there is, hey, thanks for sharing this with our learning community. The reason I'm using that phrase is because I really want them to think about this as a learning community, not a classroom. For me, and maybe not for all students, but for me, my high school experience was not that great. And so the idea of being in a classroom is not super appealing, but the idea of being in a learning community is like, I like that. It means that we're all learning together. And I want to reinforce that we're learning together. So even any kind of feedback, I'm always saying, hey, thanks for sharing this. The other thing that I've done, and I now, for the most part, I teach all asynchronous online. And what I've noticed is in asynchronous online, there's not a lot of opportunity for socialization. So I specifically have built in the socialization type questions in my discussion boards because I have all of those other assignments and tasks where they are learning the content. In weeks 1, 3, 6, and 9, I have a question that's just related to social. Like, hey, let's get to know each other. What do you love to do in your free time? And then it's really cool that this was week 3 for me. So I was grading week 3 this morning, and many of the students shared pictures of their cat, of their dog, of them at the beach, all of these kind of social things, which really I get a ton of feedback from students on how much they enjoy that. So student feedback, just a quick synopsis. Love this class. It's the best so far. So I get tons of positive feedback from my students. I have students who email me and just, hey, thanks for the wonderful semester. And this is what I tell students. You know what? Every professor is different. When you get out into the workforce, every boss you have, every leader you have is going to be different. And so I want to make sure that the learning experience they're having with me is a good one. But I also want them to understand that every professor might be different. And some people are going to be stricter and some people are going to have more flexibility. And that's fine. We need to learn how to get along with people who are different than us. So what I'm working on right now is I am actually working on 2 projects. One is how do I facilitate social and soft skills awareness and practice within asynchronous environments? And the other is how can I facilitate belonging in asynchronous courses? So those 2 areas are really where I focus because I feel like right now, ungrading gamification, I have that honed. And all of my classes are that way now. No matter which class they are, I have them all set up this exact same way. And now I'm focused on really how do I make students feel like they belong in my class in an asynchronous environment? And how do I help them with their social skills? So I am going to stop sharing my screen because we're going to open it up for questions. And I would be happy to answer any questions. Michelle as well will be happy to answer anything. So you are more than welcome to unmute yourself, raise your hand if you want to raise your hand, or you can just put it in the chat. So Michelle, in the chat, there was someone who appreciated alternative to when the assignments were due. So
Oh, I see that. Thank you, Elliot. Nice, nice. Yeah, that's been something a lot of our faculty have, as we come together and, share faculty development sessions, finding out that Sarah's absolutely correct. Most of our faculty are saying, "Oh, it's going to be due Sunday at midnight," and our students are working adults sometimes. They have families, they have other jobs, they have other obligations, they're caregivers. And so when faculty get together and realize that and have that epiphany, it's nice to have a separate setup. And Sarah, I wonder if I can ask you a question. Do you find that with having it due Friday night and then you give them a grace period, have you had any responses from students or any feedback on that?
so I get a lot of positive feedback, and it's most of the time the feedback that I get related to that is, wow, it's really nice because all my other classes are due on Sunday. So I can get it done. The other thing that I do is I open my entire course is open. So I keep them on track with emails about what week we're on and what we're working on. But I changed that a while ago. I know some professors only open it like the night before, but what I realize is our students need flexibility. I had a student who emailed me and said, "Hey, in March, this is the first vacation I'm taking my kids to Disney. Can I work ahead?" And I'm like, absolutely, absolutely. Do that work and don't take any work from my class with you. Mm. Because that's how I would treat somebody if they were working for me, right? And so as an adult, if they take the time to ask that question, I want to make sure that I can do that for them.
Absolutely. That's great.
Okay, there's a question in what were the challenges and how did you overcome it using Canvas? The biggest challenge for me was when I first started was I put the due dates. It was like I broke it into 3 sections. So basically the first third, towards the middle, and then the end of the semester. And students, not all students, but a majority of students in the Canvas MLS specifically are only working from the to-do list that's on their homepage, and they're not necessarily going into the modules in Canvas to look at what they have to do. So some of the things that I did to overcome that was anything that I put in the module has a due date, even if it's something that I'm not even going to give them a point for, because I want to make sure that they're seeing it if they're that type of student who are not going in and working through the modules. And then because I let them opt out, and the one thing that I will say is very nice about Canvas in the grade book is you can choose which module you're grading. So every week I have a module and I can click on and just see that module only. So I'm easily able to tell if a student did all the assignments or if they skipped one. And it makes it super easy on me when I'm going in there and assigning points or putting zeros in it. Okay, let's see here. Comment from Desiree. Hopefully I said that right. She said, I started implementing a request for extension form. I thought it was going to be abused, but it has not been in 2 years. In the 2 years that I've been using it, they can't use it for discussion because that would affect on peer feedback, but they can use it for an assignment. They have up to a week to turn it in. Yeah, that is so cool. This is what I've discovered. I discovered this in class, but also in the workplace, right? Oftentimes we make a rule for the one person who abuses something, and we forget about all the amazing people who won't. So I try to always gut check myself whenever I'm implementing something. And I ask myself, am I putting this in place for the one student I don't want to deal with? Or is it something that really needs to be put in place for everybody? And I try to use that.
Nice. And Sarah, I think there's another question. Could you share how many students are in your class and any suggestions on managing ungrading feedback, workload in large classes?
Yeah, so I am very fortunate. I teach for a regional campus. And so the most students that I have in a class are, right now I have 32 is my biggest class, and my smallest class is 25. So I have about 130 students total. And I know that there's some people who have classes that are 130 for one class. And I can't even imagine having a class that large. However, some of the things that I think are really important is utilizing, so most books, most digital books that you get, like if you're using Canvas, McGraw-Hill is the one that I use, so I know a lot about that. McGraw-Hill has a lot of assignments that you can put into place for your course that are automatically graded. And it's giving the students feedback. So what I do on those ones is I set them to unlimited tries. And I tell the student, if you don't get it right the first time, go back in and redo it. So it doesn't negatively affect them and they're not getting negative points or anything like that. But that saves me a lot of work because I'm not manually grading all of that stuff or giving them points for all of it. It just happens automatically. For discussion boards, it's a little bit more difficult, especially if you have that big of a group. I can tell you that when when it's a large group, I have a notepad. The newer version of Notepad has tabs, and I have a tab that has the answers that I use all the time. I think Michelle was talking about that earlier, like a feedback thing. Like if I'm giving the same feedback, that I can just copy and paste that in and give them feedback that way. Sorry, I don't have a bunch of great answers just because I've not had an extra large class. If anybody else has a strategy that they've been using, I would love, you can share it with us. We'd love to hear it. Oh, can you share some strategies on ensuring students feel like they belong? Yes, actually, I'm because I've worked with a project group on this, and we specifically have been working on asynchronous environment and helping students feel like they belong in asynchronous. I can tell you it's a bunch of little things that help this. So for starters, if a student emails me for any reason, I tell my first line every single time is thanks for reaching out. And then I have whatever the message is that I want to talk to them about. In all my asynchronous classes, and because I'm comfortable on video, I do intro videos. I do tons of video throughout my entire course, but my videos are really short. It's maybe 2 minutes to 5 minutes long, and it's where I'm talking to the students. In one of my courses, the students have to do videos presentations because it's advanced professional development. And so I do video feedback of their video that they've provided because I want to tell them the things that they did great and the things that they need to work on. And because they're doing video, I want to make sure I'm giving them the feedback in video. And it's also, there's an online, hold on, I'll pull it up real quick and I'll tell you what it's called. The student first day toolkit. It's under the student experience website, and it talks about the wording in your syllabus and how that simple things that you can do with the language that you use in your word choices. That's why I use learning community in a lot of my stuff. It makes a huge difference. What do you do with students who jump straight into assignments without engaging in the course materials? So it's pretty impossible to in my courses, to jump straight into assignments without engaging in the course materials, because in my discussion boards, I often have, I love TED Talk videos. I teach business. So I can get away with using TED Talk videos because a lot of them are addressing video content that relate to course, that relate to business, that kind of stuff. And so the questions in the normal discussion board will be about, hey, in your reading and with this TED Talk, what did you learn from it? What was your takeaway? How would you apply it in the workforce? That kind of stuff. So it almost forces them to engage in it in order to answer the question. And I purposely try not to give students a lot of extra, like, I try to make my course really simple and clean, so it's easy for them to navigate and engage in that content. Michelle, do you have any tips?
Oh my gosh, I think you're doing such a great job, Sarah. I think that what you said is very accurate, right? Like design the course materials so that when you're doing those assessments, those questions come directly from that content, so they do have to watch it. I was working recently with a new faculty member who felt like their engagement with their online course wasn't enough, that they weren't showing themselves enough, and they switched to doing some short video introductions before they cover the content of how does this relate to the real world? Why should you watch this? This is the key points to look for. And they just do that now as like a highlight, and they kind of build that suspense of like, oh, guess what you're going to learn today? And then they cover more of what, they're going to actually learn in the content of the video. And then all of the reflection questions have to do with the video itself and watching it and or the video that accompanies the PowerPoint. So yeah, Sarah, I think you hit right on it. I know we're almost out of time, respectfully. Are there any final questions or comments from anybody? And using the chat is great.
Michelle, one last thing, for anybody who's using an online platform, the other thing that I do that seems to really help me is I have all of my announcements already written out. So I have my announcement each week talks about, hey, what we covered last week, what we're going to learn this week. And I try to make sure that I carry those over every semester. So I'm not redoing all that work. That's another thing that saves me a lot of time. So Bob, I think we'll turn it back over to you.
I think, yeah, great. I wish you guys had more enthusiasm though for your subject.
I'm very passionate about it. It's
Yeah,
so cool. So
I I remember the best faculty I ever had or I worked with were ones who were passionate and enthusiastic about what they did, as opposed to somebody who's just kind of like robotic in there. So I appreciate it. So, okay, it's great having you guys with us again this year, and odds are we might get you again next year. We have another session coming at the top of the hour. Hope to see folks there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.